Tonight's runway show, Working It, is brought to you by the House of Pride. We're pleased to present our 2012 collection, a strong display of historical, functional, whimsical, and colorful clothing, unified by the thread of justice. We begin our show with a retrospective nod to the grande dame of labor couture, Mary Harris Jones, better known as Mother Jones. Born in Cork, Ireland, Mary aspired to a career as a wife and a mother and teacher before ultimately finding her true calling as the most dangerous woman in America. How's the dress code for that one? And what life experiences transformed this good Irish lass from anonymity to being one of the most recognized, loved, and reviled public faces in America?
I'm going to tell you this and not out of pity, because I want you to understand. In 1867, typhoid fever swept through Memphis. All I ever wanted to be was a mother. And it took all 4 of my babies, sick and died. I washed their little bodies and I dressed them for burial. And then my husband took ill and died. The union buried him, thank God. No one came to sit with me. There was no one to come and sit with me. So I grieved alone. It was everywhere, typhoid fever. And I was left alone. So I went back home to Chicago. And I opened a business. Women in business, a good thing. I was sewing for the wealthy, the richest and most elite of Chicago. And where my desk sat, where my sewing machine sat, there were big plate glass windows. And I could sit there and watch along the frozen lake as those who were homeless and hungry walked along the frozen lake. And here I'm handling fabrics that cost more than a month's wages of my own. And I'm thinking, this is why I have to invest myself in the labor struggle. This is wrong.
Whoa, that's a pretty rough start. Certainly explains her black dress and white hair. But this woman had not an ounce of self-pity. She threw herself into organizing. Workers were virtually enslaved during the Gilded Age. Mother Jones was a witty Irish storyteller, and she wasn't averse to using props and dramatic stunts for effect. Her vintage Victorian look, for instance, was intentional because she knew the value of branding herself as a grandmotherly matron. She always added 7 years to her age. She referred to the men she worked with as me boys, and she always dressed in outdated styles. She dressed for success, and it worked. Her first arrest was when she was 72 years old. And it kept her from being murdered, as so many organizers of the day were. Every organizer needs a little black dress, except Jessie Lenny, maybe.
Jessie Lenny needs one too. You know, it was a difficult time. The organizing work in the coal mines was especially bad. Men disappeared, many of them, and just never seen again. They were murdered. Businesses were told, don't sell to the mine people. Don't sell to the mine people. And then they would throw the whole family out on the highway and leave them there. We had to meet in secret. In the night, we had to go to the woods. We had to meet in abandoned coal mines. Dangerous. It was also dangerous. We had to meet in barns. Cold. Cold as hell. Freeze your arse off. And we had nothing but hard bread. It was a difficult time.
Of course, in the field, Mother Jones at times did not remove her clothing for days on end. fear that she would be forced out of a lodging or be arrested at any time. Coco Chanel perhaps had mother in mind when she said, "A woman who doesn't wear perfume has no future." Our next look is seriously fashion forward. Shabby chic day wear, inspired by Mother Jones, as she worked with striking coal miners. The look is best suited for scab chasing and mule scaring.
In Hartwell, Pennsylvania, it was an especially long strike. The boys were getting tired, and they were getting quite disillusioned. And you know what happens when you get disillusioned to miners? And they're tired of striking. So I went down to give them a little bolster. And I got down there, and I thought, you know, we got to do something different. So I went to the miners and I said, "Now, I want y'all to stay home with your babes." And they all looked at me as if I was crazy. And I said, "Because I want your wives to come with me today." I told the women, "Gather up your mops, gather up your brooms, grab a pot or two. We're going to go make some noise." So I organized my army of women, and I took them down there. Now, I decided not to go. Word had come to me that they were looking hard to arrest me. I'd avoided it to this point. I wanted to avoid it a little bit longer. So I had to choose someone that I thought would be the best to stand in my place. And I found her. She'd slept a little late, so she crawled out of bed. She put on her red petticoat, and her husband said, Get, you gotta get in the army. And she pulled on the first thing she could find. She ran down here, but I liked her. Her eyes were full of fire, and she looked mad as hell. That was my girl.
And Mother Jones said to me, "You lead the women up to the drip mouth, and don't you be afraid of anyone." And so I led that army of women up the mountainside, and when we saw the scabs coming with the mules and the coal, we started banging on our pumps and hollering, and the whole army joined in. I said, the whole army joined in! And then the sheriff tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Be careful of the mules. Do not frighten them." And I hit him with my wooden spoon and I said, "To hell with the mules, and to hell with you, and to hell with the scabs!" And from that day forward, the women kept watch over the mines to make sure the company didn't send in scabs. And the strike was won!
The fashion police were all over her outfit, though. Joan Rivers, in particular, was rude. Clearly, mine work was dangerous, and at times when mules were more valued than men, robber baron mine owners didn't waste a penny protecting workers. Men worked underground with explosives without safety regulations. In 1 year, 25,000 American workers died on the job. Many more were injured. You lose an arm, that's your problem. Obviously, a worker had to choose his own safety gear carefully. Our model shows the cutting edge of protective gear for miners in the early 1900s. It's pretty apparent where today's goth look came from. Okay. So what kind of gear protected men? Well, let's see. We have the cloth brim of the cap that prevented wax from dripping into their eyes. I suppose the snappy suspenders prevented sagging pants. I don't know, that's danger. And the stylish mustache was used to filter coal dust, I'm sure. The most important accessory, of course, no miner would be complete without it, was the canary in the cage. Theoretically, if there was a gas leak and the canary rolled over, you would have a couple minutes to make it out of the mine, provided the line being pulled up one at a time out of the mine was not too long. Scott, what's wrong with your bird? Jones worked 24 years organizing mine workers, and it didn't go well. Owners hired private armies. Our government sent thousands of militia to protect scabs. It was a grim time for workers. People were starving, and women's contraceptives were not covered by health insurance. Okay, another event. As I mentioned before, this was the Gilded Age. The Vanderbilts had a dinner party where guests mined jewels out of a sandbox that ran down the center of their dining table. The media was owned by the wealthy, wouldn't report on the workers' struggles. By 1890, 1% of the population owned more property than all the rest of the nation's peoples combined. Mother Jones was no advocate of violence. She claimed her success was achieved with only the use of a hat pin. But at the height of the brutality, Mother Jones told the men, "Go home now. Keep away from the saloons and save your money. You're gonna need it." "What will we need it for, Mother?" One guy shouted. "For guns," she said, "to buy guns." You've all heard the term redneck. The term originated during the West Virginia mine wars. Our model, who obviously survived the little gas mishap earlier, is wearing the trendy red bandana that so many miners added to their wardrobes just prior to the Battle of Blair Mountain. The Battle of Blair Mountain was the largest organized armed uprising in American labor history. It led almost directly to the labor laws currently in effect in the United States. For nearly a week in September 1921, in Logan County, West Virginia, close to 15,000 coal miners confronted company-paid detectives while trying to unionize. Gatling guns were used against the strikers, and private airplanes dropped gas and explosive bombs. Miners fought in all kinds of outfits, including World War I uniforms they brought back from France. They had brought back rifles too, although I see that our miner possibly has left his rifle someplace. Most miners wore bibbed overalls and red bandanas around their necks. It became known as the Redneck Army. The opposition used the term. "Give my regards to the boys," said one strike breaker, "and kill all the rednecks you can." Thank you, Scott. There were 150 deaths. 985 miners were arrested for murder and treason. But the nation took notice. You want a living wage? You might be a redneck. In her spare time, Mother Jones rallied textile workers, many of them children, who worked 60 to 80 hours a week. Per Elizabeth Shapley, Dr. Elizabeth Shapley, 36 of every 100 men and women who worked in the mill died before 25 years of age. In 1903, Mother Jones brought national focus to the evils of child labor by leading a march of young mill children from Pennsylvania to Oyster Bay to see the president. She made the front page of the New York Times daily in that little black dress of hers. Amongst garment workers, resistance to sweatshop conditions intensified steadily. In 1909, 2,000 dressmakers in New York City went on strike. The Triangle Fire happened. In 1912, textile workers won the Bread and Roses strike in Massachusetts, and women and children were down to 54-hour work weeks. A year later, here in Rochester, New York, garment workers strike over the right to organize. You could not be in a union and keep your job. In January, 200 garment workers walked off the job.
Oh, come along, girls. Join the... I forgot my lines.
What? Come on, girls. Join the walkout. Stand together. Nothing can change if we don't have a union. You have a right. Join the fight. 17-year-old was working long hours, 6 days a week. As she urged her fellow garment workers to join the strike, she was shot dead by her employer, here in Rochester, 17 years old. He must have thought this was a right-to-kill workers state. In response, 10,000 garment workers went on strike, and they won the right for Rochester garment workers to be represented by a union without penalty. Thank you, Ida Brayman. Rosie the Riveter. A fashion look that today stands for women's empowerment, especially within the labor movement. But Rosie didn't start out that way. The poster that we know actually was just an unnamed World War II morale booster poster that appeared for 2 weeks in a Westinghouse plant in the Midwest. It disappeared for 4 decades until the women's movement resurrected it. The real Rosie the Riveter was Rose Will Monroe, who did work as a riveter in a B-52 plant. Monroe starred in promotional films and posters used to encourage women, of course, to come out and join the workforce. She was probably the most widely recognized icon of the era and succeeded in raising the number of women in 4 years' time from 12 to 20 million on the job. Conditions were hard, and the pay wasn't equal to men, but women proved themselves capable to themselves and the country that they could do a man's job and do it well. And the long-range significance of this, of course, provided the foundation to the contemporary women's movement. Similarly, the process of blacks working with whites encouraged the breaking down of social barriers. African-American activists like A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin fought racial discrimination in defense jobs and laid the groundwork for the post-civil rights movement. Thank you. Wrong arm. Speaking of Bayard Rustin was a labor, social, and civil rights activist for over 50 years. In that time, rarely was he seen without his trademark white shirt and thin black tie, a fashion minimalist. He was a brilliant theorist, tactician, organizer. He conceived of the coalition of liberal, labor, and religious leaders who used his nonviolent direct actions to support the passage of the civil rights in the 60s. Rustin worked closely with the labor movement to ensure that African American workers had their rightful place in the House of Labor. He also worked to achieve integration of the armed forces. In 1947, Rustin helped plan the first Freedom Ride in the South to challenge the Jim Crow laws and interstate travel. He co-founded the AFL-CIO A. Philip Randolph Institute, the Congress of Racial Equality, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He assisted Dr. King 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. He was chiefly responsible for one of the most important nonviolent protests in American history, the 1963 March on Washington, in which King delivered his electrifying I Have a Dream speech. Rustin had first-hand knowledge of discrimination, not only because he was African American, but because of his openness about being gay. Although an organizational genius, he was forced into the background to avoid conflict. Regardless, his contributions to the civil rights and labor movements are monumental. It's no wonder Bayard kept his wardrobe simple. Who had time to shop? One thing is certain to me, though, the best dressed man in the house is always the guy sporting the suit with the union label. The practice of using union labels started among San Francisco cigar makers in 1875. Union labels became synonymous with quality. At one time, barrel manufacturers insisted that employees become Cooper Union members as they could not sell barrels without the union stamp. Unions recognized the power of consumer spending of members and allies to promote union building. The slogan became, "Ask for the label," more effective than the boycott. Campaigns to promote the union label resulted in greater demand for union-made products and services and reduced the indifferences of consumers to low wages and poor working conditions that made cheap imports possible. However, in the 70s, an expanding global marketplace and unfair trading practices brought a flood of less expensive products here, and the buy union movement became less sustainable. But like fashion, it's coming around again. Americans are again embracing union-made and American-made. Go General Motors. And proving we have it done, we have our 100% union man and 100% union-made outlet. Ties, shoes, everything. I'll trust you on the underwear, Tim. Next up is seasonal strike wear. Strike wear is making a comeback this year. And frankly, I'm glad to see it. Our model projects confidence and poise in his sensible cold weather ensemble. The thrifty union member will be pleased to note that the look is easily convertible for other seasons. There we go. And this is our versatile summer look. Note the comfortable shoes. It's the truest sign of an experienced picketer. Of course, a real old-timer like Colin knows enough to bring along a lawn chair, a jug of water, an umbrella. Accessories make the outfit. Okay. And Colin is going to demonstrate. A bullhorn, of course, is a must-have. He has his percussion instruments. Some people like to bring their pets. Okay? But sometimes the strike look, especially this year, drifts into a direct action look. It's been trending that way all year. The bonus of the direct action look is that sometimes it'll get you a free professional photo done at no cost to you. Let's move on to contemporary labor convention wear. Is there anything that is more... Is there any look that is more predictable? Delegates haul huge suitcases to hotels and pull on a t-shirt day after day for a week. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some people look good and kitschy. But I am so glad to hear they've started a Union Hoarders Anonymous group. Badly needed. I don't mean to pick on Tom Privateer. Where are you? Most of these buttons belong to Tom. They date back to the 70s. Tom, you've got to let go. Disco is dead. Really, how many union totes can you realistically use in one lifetime, okay? And I'm going to say the same about any union stick, bumper stickers, candy bars, lunch bags, pens, pads of paper, rulers, keychains, water bottles, pen lights, mouse pads, snow brushes, medical kits, coffee cups, eyeglass cleaners, pads, refrigerator magnets, bag clips, travel mugs, and most recently, emergency duct tape kits.
Lots of that. Oh yeah. I got it all, guys.
Okay. And this year there's a new product. Okay, you'll all be excited about it.
Uh-huh.
We're ready. Frankly, anybody who needs to be reminded of which union they are in, this much should be tested for Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And then there are people who can take the mundane and elevate it to levels that leave one speechless. Although that kind of left me speechless. Our friend Mary Ann is the only human I know who can take a Union t-shirt and make it look sexy. Mary Ann's life philosophy is, if the shoe fits, buy it. She cares about things like invisible panty lines. She's amazing. Let's be honest, most of us union folk base our fashion choices on what doesn't itch. We call her look diva convention look. I must warn you, don't try this look at home by yourself. This is advanced fashion design, not for the faint of heart. Labor conventions do not give you a lot to work with, so call Mary Ann. Or you can check her labor fashion self-help website at www.wecandoit.com. So folks, that's the end of our little show. We hope you got a few laughs, but we also have a message. The odds against labor seem formidable right now, just as they did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. But the power, instincts, and talents of workers on the job should never be underestimated. What George Bernard Shaw said about fashion maybe applies to labor too. The novelties of one generation are only the resuscitated fashion of the generation before that. What goes around comes around, and the sleeping giant that is the working class is waking again all over this country and the world. All we need to do, like Mother Jones, is to learn to use a hat pin effectively. As our actors come back up for a bow, I'd like to acknowledge the scholarly sources from whom we stole. We have a Michael, okay? Take a bow. Thank you all. Wonderful. I would like to acknowledge the scholarly sources from whom we stole material for this show. John Garlock and Linda Donahue were the authors of all these years of effort. The autobiography of Mother Jones by Mother Jones, and Wikipedia, and I'm not proud of that. Thank you so much.